Skorupi.
Carnivine?
Earlier this week, I was doing a run of Elite 4 Round 2 in Platinum. This requires you to see every Pokémon in the Sinnoh Dex, and as part of that run, you do what's referred to as a chain minute, where you chain multiple wild encounters together, back to register seeing them. Here, I was expecting to see a Skorupi. I had spent a decent amount of time testing and verifying that this encounter in the Great Marsh should definitely, in a run, be a Skorupi. But when I finally got there in a run, it wasn't. Let's look into why. So in the Great Marsh, there is a daily function called Changing Pokémon. This function only runs when a new day is passed and uses the Mersenne Twister RNG to determine what Pokémon will appear as changing Pokémon. These Pokémon overwrite slots 6 and 7, both of which have a 5% chance, adding to 10% total, and will vary for all 6 areas of the Great Marsh. The encounter that I got in the run was indeed the slot 6 encounter that I was aiming for. The Pokémon had just changed from Carnivine instead of changing to Skorupi. But why? After all, I had tested this exact scenario, hitting the initial seed, playing through the route, and then hitting the chain minute seed without touching the date whatsoever. Did somehow entering penalty time by changing the time after the Elite 4 do this? It shouldn't have, because I had specifically tested under penalty time conditions. Nothing seemed to make sense, so it was time to throw away assumptions that had been made in order to find the answer. Because the assumptions that had been based upon the Great Marsh daily RNG being the same every run, which they should be, given we know daily events are the same every run. After all, the route in Heart Gold Soul Silver is quite famous for winning a Master Ball from the lottery, which is a daily event, by matching your trainer ID to the lottery ID. But clearly based on what happened in my run, that wasn't true for the Great Marsh, and a look into the game code revealed exactly why. When starting a run in Gen 4 that uses RNG manipulation, you play through the intro cutscene and time the final input before the initial seed generation in order to hit the ideal seed. In Diamond Pearl Platinum, this is clearing the TV screen, and in Heart Gold Soul Silver, this is clearing the last Oak text box. During the following black loading screen where the seed is generated, a number of other things occur, such as the game giving you your trainer ID, secret ID, initializing the save, and running daily RNG functions, such as the lottery ID. My mistake was running on the assumption that because daily RNG functions run here, that all of them would. But no. It turns out Game Freak, in all their wisdom, actually initialize a separate seed at this point here, as soon as you clear the title screen. And it's here that the game determines the Great Marsh daily RNG. Now, why would this be separate when starting a new game? I've got absolutely no idea. It's even more strange when you consider for every other instance of calling the daily RNG, i.e. when a day passes, the Great Marsh and the lottery do happen at the same time. In fact, there's even a tool that helps you manipulate these two things together if you're using an existing save file. So it was a pretty fair assumption to think they would be together at the start of a new game as well. But alas, an incorrect one. I can only assume someone at Game Freak 17 years ago was setting up this epic troll just for me, because there's really no other reason it should be separate when creating a new game. But so what does this mean for the speedrun? Well, in theory, it actually makes the route faster. With Great Marsh Pokémon not tied to the initial seed, it means you can get different results, which means you can force the best possible result, that being Skorupi in Area 6, which is the closest area to the entrance. This would save about 10 seconds over the previous route, which had to take the train to Area 2. However, it comes with two problems. Firstly, finding out exactly what Great Marsh seeds I have been hitting to be able to adjust to favourable seeds. And secondly, how am I going to be able to tell what seeds I hit before getting to the Great Marsh? For the first problem, with the help of Mo, the creator of the tool I mentioned before, and Selen, another runner, I managed to find the seed that I hit was 900602A7. The second problem is much trickier and impacts both the routing and the running phase. For routing, it would be incredibly slow to have to get save files all the way up to the Great Marsh to test what the results I am hitting to be able to verify that the timing is correct. And for runs, if you had to play all the way up to the Great Marsh to find out the results were wrong, it would be absolutely devastating, as it would cost at least 2 to 3 minutes to get Skorupi elsewhere, given doing so would break the entire chain minute, and this would essentially ruin the entire run. And there is seemingly no tell before then that you could use. And by a tell, I mean something you can look at that tells you what your results are. For example, on the overall RNG seed, you can either look at your trainer ID, Or if you don't want to waste the few seconds, you can look at the NPCs outside in Twinleaf Town to see how they move. Because they move based on what the RNG is, you can determine that, because they have moved in this particular way, I know the RNG I have hit is either correct or incorrect. But that is not connected to the RNG state at which the Great Marsh Pokémon are determined. And between the title screen where they are created, and the TV screen where the overall RNG is created, nothing advances or calls the RNG to give you a tell. That is, until I had an idea to force one. When Rowan asks you for your name, you have the option of entering a blank one. The game then generates a name for you, as it turns out, by calling the RNG. There are actually more names that you might think too, 18 of them, which might just be enough to determine whether you have got the right result or not. After the game generates a name for you, you can simply say no to the name and then input a one-character name as desired for a run. While this does take some time, if nothing else, it definitely helps for the routing process, as I can check names as many times as I need to verify the seed I hit for Great Marsh Pokémon. For a run, the hope is that there's just enough time to check once, and that one check is all I need to verify the seed is right or wrong. Ideally then, I need to find a cluster of seeds where multiple in a row give Skorupi in Area 6, and everything that just misses that cluster of seeds will give a different name to the ones that give Skorupi, in order to avoid false positives. How many in a row that work is really a take what you get sort of deal. In practice, the success rate that I have with hitting a 1 frame window is about 50%. With a 2 frame window, this would increase to about 75%. For a 3 frame window, more like 92%. For a 4 frame, more like 97%, and a 5 frame window, more like 99.9%. So I would like a cluster of at least 3 frames, as that would be desirable to avoid a lot of extra resets. The odds of Skorupi being the changing Pokemon for Area 6 is 5 in 32. This means the odds of any given seed being acceptable is 5 in 32, or 15.625%. And obviously, as you can see, the more in a row you want, the less likely it is for that to appear. Normally, these type of odds wouldn't be so bad for finding seeds because there's so many options. But in this case, there actually isn't that many options. I can't change the time or the date, as I need them for the overall primary RNG seed. So all I can change is the amount of time I wait on the title screen to alter the delay, which gives me about 60 options per second, and I only have a handful of seconds before I won't be able to hit the initial RNG seed. And if I plan to use the name check, I might not have much time at all. In fact, I wasn't sure if I would have any time whatsoever. But luckily, a cluster does exist very quickly that is 3 frames wide. 9006, 02C1, C3, and C5 all give Skorupi in Area 6, and this is only an increase of a delay by 26 to 30 from what I hit in my run where I was just mashing, so just about half a second of a wait. So then I checked the names around this cluster, and it was perfect. Correct Skorupi seeds would either give a default name of Andy, Dwight, or Mark, and incorrect seeds that miss by 1 to 2 frames would give names of Joey, Randy, Plato, or Eric. No false positives. Then I went to test whether I could make the initial seed, and the result was just barely. If I mashed as fast as I could, I only just make it with about a quarter of a second to spare. This gave me pause, as I really don't like mashing as fast as I can through the intro, as it hurts my hands over an extended period of time during what I'd like to be the most relaxing part, as most runs don't make it past resetting. The second problem that arose was that by waiting an extra half a second, sometimes I would end up hitting a second later at the seed generation, and get 910602C3 as a result instead, which does not give Skorupi. The third problem was that I had to check how much lag backing out of the name creates. This is because lag frames are not counted to the delay, and so if there is a little bit of extra lag, you have to wait more time to reach the same amount of delay. There's another more critical reason to check the lag frames though, and that's to see if it adds to an odd number. And as it turns out it does. It adds 15 frames of lag. An odd number of lag frames is important because it changes the parity. What does this mean? Well, the delay is the amount of frames that have passed, counted at 60 frames per second, plus the last 2 digits of the year. The game, however, only accepts inputs at 30 frames per second, meaning that every second frame is unhittable, depending on your lag frames. By adding an odd amount of lag frames, you change your parity between which seeds are hittable and unhittable. This is also why I said 900602C1, C3, and C5 are adjacent seeds, because they are all on the same parity. So for instance, the aim for the primary RNG seed is A5061513, an odd number. Because there is normally an odd number of lag frames, this is hittable, but with 15 more lag frames added, I end up on an even number of lag frames and it becomes unhittable. However, this can be rectified by simply changing the year. I was previously using an even year, 2098, so by changing that to 2099, I can then change the parity back to the desired result and still hit A5061513. But then I can no longer hit the Great Marsh seeds, because I would then be adding an odd number before they are generated, but not two odd numbers, because the name check is after the Great Marsh seed is created. So I would instead have to stay on an even year and add another odd number of lag frames during the cutscene. This can be done by entering a 2-character name and then deleting a character to add 1 frame of lag. Entirely possible, but that extra bit of time during the intro cutscene becomes significant when I could only just make the seed to begin with. Mashing to make it in time will become very, very difficult and stressful, to the point where several runs just simply won't make it in time, adding to the amount of runs that will have to reset. Not wanting to settle with that option, I looked further into the results and decided to try the idea of not name checking, but finding a cluster wide enough that I would be confident enough of hitting it without having to verify. And with a bit of a later delay, there is a 4-frame cluster, 9206, 0304, 06, 08, and 0A, all give Skorupi in Area 6. I should be able to hit a 4-frame cluster nearly every time, but not having the option to check every run is a bit scary. These are all even seeds, so I would have to play on an odd year and then delete a character to hit both these and the desired primary RNG seed. But given I'm not going to be name verifying, there would be more than enough time to do so. This would also change the parity for the chain minute seed, and I don't want to change the year before hitting that seed. This is fixable though, by simply not having a game in the GBA slot like I used to use, as that adds 1 frame of lag to seeds when you continue a save file, but does not to seeds from a new save file at the start of the run. So this cluster would work for the entire run. Both of these options are totally viable and end up coming down to runner preference. Do you want to mash really fast in the intro but be able to verify that the seed is correct? Or save yourself that trouble and hope that when you finally get a good run, you manage to hit that 4-frame window, and if you missed, well, the run is gone. Ultimately for me, I'm leaning towards the latter. I hit the cluster 20 out of 20 times in practice, and I can claim that I'm not doing the name cancel because it actually saves me 1/4 of a second in lag frames. And hopefully when I finally get another run to the Great Marsh, a Skorupi shows up. Thank you for listening.